Good morning, I'm Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. I want to thank you for joining me this morning. Normally this would be the meeting time for the meeting after the meeting. However, today we have a special guest joining me. It's Jill Geisinger. She's the director of our Children and Youth Services here in Carbon County. And for about the next 25 to 30 minutes, we're going to spend some time with her discussing Children and Youth Services and the mission of the individuals who work under her direction and her guidance. Jill, thank you so much for joining me this morning and your willingness to come on and have a conversation about the important mission that almost 3 dozen employees in Children and Youth Services carry out in support of the residents and specifically the children and youth of Carbon County. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Jill, can you give us a little bit about your background and what brought you to the point of being where you are today, just about a year to 14 months into the position as Director of Children and Youth Services?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, please.
Well, I am luckily a 15-year resident of Carbon County. I've been here, and I've also worked for the county for 15 years at Children and Youth Services. I started off as a caseworker 1, and I worked my way up to now administrator. I have a background in criminal justice, a 4-year degree from the University of Canton in New York.
Okay.
And I have a master's degree in psychology.
Okay, and so just it would have been about April of the last year, is that correct, that you assumed the directorship of Children and Youth Services?
Yes, I did.
Right. Well, thank you for your willingness to take on what is truly a very challenging task, a very challenging organization, and in issues that are very sensitive, could be considered very disturbing at times. Child abuse is a very concerning topic. Can you tell us specifically, and those who are listening, about the mission, the roles and responsibilities of your office?
Yeah, Carbon County Children and Youth, we have our mission to promote safety and well-being of children here in Carbon County. We also want to provide services to families in need in Carbon County, and we want to prevent child abuse and neglect from occurring. So, and by doing that, providing the services, promoting safety and well-being, and being in the community and partnering with other agencies, that's how we do that.
Right. So give us a sense of the organization that accomplishes the mission you outlined. How is it organized? How does it operate on a day-to-day basis, in a broad sense?
Sure. Well, we have 16 caseworker staff that, and we have 1 person each day that rotates that takes the reports. We also receive reports from the Child Abuse Hotline in Harrisburg.
Okay.
Under the Child Protective Services law, they're required to take those reports, and mandated reporters call those in. So we receive the reports, the caseworkers investigate the reports of abuse and neglect and provide services, and then we have 4 supervisors who oversee those caseworkers, a manager, and then myself as administrator. We also have a fiscal department that takes care of all the bills. It's very expensive to take care of the children here in Carbon County.
All right. So what I see, and help correct my visual, you have the director. Under the director, connected is a fiscal entity of a couple employees, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Then below you are 4, the term you use for the 4 who are directly under you are supervisors. And each supervisor are they each responsible for so many caseworkers?
That's correct. They have 4 each.
So 4 each. So the caseworkers, are they further classified based upon experience, skills, background?
Yes, they are.
Right.
So if you have a bachelor's degree, you can become a caseworker 1. Also, if you have associate's degree and you have 2 years experience in a related field, accounting services, you could be a caseworker 1. With that experience, either after 6 months or a year, and commendable status, you can be promoted to caseworker 2.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of what was the size of the office when you assumed the directorship to where it is today?
We had 11 caseworkers. We had 3 supervisors, and an administrator in the fiscal department.
Okay.
Currently, it's grown quite a bit.
You're right.
We now have.
I don't know why that phone is ringing so many times. That's incredible. So always remember, right? Always remember, to mute the phone calls also before you start your live streaming. And that's a novice error, right? That shouldn't be repeated after so many times we've done this. So our apologies for that. So Jill was describing, and I think her audio did get through that. She was describing where she was with the office in size and composition just about 14 months ago to where it is today, which been a significant change in size. And a lot of that has to do to the responsibilities. And those responsibilities are outlined in Pennsylvania code and law. Could we talk about some of the laws or Pennsylvania code that kind of drives your duties and responsibilities and your caseworkers on a day-to-day basis?
Well, absolutely. First, we have the Juvenile Act.
Okay.
And the Juvenile Act basically defines dependency and delinquency.
Okay.
JPO, our Juvenile Probation Office, takes care of our delinquent children. Those
Okay.
are children that are not managed at home because of some sort of criminal act.
Okay.
And then we have the dependency system, which
Okay.
child welfare oversees the dependent children. And we file a petition with the court, and the court reviews those facts and then determines, is that child without proper parental care
Okay.
or without guardian? Because maybe the guardian is deceased, maybe they are incarcerated and
Right.
are unable to care for them. So based on those 10 definitions of dependent children in the Juvenile Act, we can file that dependency and go through that court system.
Could you give a couple examples of individuals who aren't receiving appropriate parental oversight?
Sure. I would say the most common one that we have in Carbon County is a parent that is addicted to substances and is unable to perform their parental duties or meet the basic needs of a child.
Okay.
So maybe a child is back and forth between grandma's houses and not in a stable living situation. So that would, depending on what the facts are, would be defined as a dependent child.
Okay. So let's move on to another law, or the Child Protective Services law. One, and I understand you all have you are the investigative lead for infractions of that law. If you could explain that, and then maybe the investigative process that takes place.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite laws. I've read it many times.
Okay.
The Child Protective Services law defines abuse and neglect. There are two types of reports that we investigate. We investigate the abuse and neglect, and they call that child protective. There's also general protective. So that would be maybe some disciplinary issues, maybe some hygiene issues, behavioral health issues, and that's under the general. So mostly under the protective services, we are the sole agency that investigates abuse and neglect in Carbon County. So those reports would come to us. And child abuse is defined as an act that is knowing, intentional, or reckless that a parent or guardian commits that causes harm to a child. So any maltreatment that was basically on purpose.
So if I spank my child, is that abuse?
Under PA code, you are allowed to spank your child.
Right.
If it goes to an extreme where there is substantial pain or impairment, that would be classified as abuse.
Oh, okay. All right. So then let's go forth and talk about adoption and the Adoption Act, because it sounds like that's not about abuse, but it sounds like once a child maybe is in the position where they're not getting appropriate care, the parent can no longer care for them, then the next step would be, let's find that child a home.
Right. We always want to do what's in the child's best interest.
Right.
And sometimes that best interest may be to not return the child to the parent for whatever reason. And under the law, we have 15 months to do reasonable efforts. So that's working with the family, working with the child, providing visitations, making sure that we're doing the best we can to try to reunify the child. And when that doesn't happen, then we want to terminate the child's rights or move forward with the termination. There's involuntary, which means we're going to present the facts and we're going to present to the judge that this is the best for the child. Then there's voluntary, where the parent says, you know what, I'm not able to care for this child. I want this to occur. This is what's best for the child. And we go through and proceed that way. And the Adoption Act allows us to do that in that time frame, 15 months to whenever is appropriate.
So you did mention taking your case in front of a judge. There are 3 judges here in Carbon County. When it comes to these types of cases, does one judge focus on them, or is it possible for you to present your case and obviously on the other side to present their case to any one of the three judges, or there's one who has a specific specialty or focus area on this area of the law?
A dependency is mostly seen by Judge Joseph Matika.
Okay.
And we go in front of him and schedule in front of him as best we can. Another position that we actually got to proceed with was a dependency hearing officer.
Okay.
And that is, it's upcoming. And this person will be able to hear our dependency matters and take some of that away from the judge, which is really exciting.
Okay.
But however, Judge Matika will hear our facts and then he'll make a determination on dependency, disposition, and any other further orders that we might want. We do go in front of Judge Nanovic and Judge Surface on some matters, when there's a conflict.
Sure.
Or a specific case that we can't do in Matika's
Right.
court, but mostly we're in front of Judge Matika.
Jill, in other offices, but these are court-specific related, we hear the term a master. Does children and youth use, quote-unquote, a master?
We do not, we have a hearing officer.
Just the hearing officer is the equivalent of someone who's kind of in between, is a step before going in front of the judge. And there's certain levels of decisions they can make?
That's correct.
Right.
Mainly the dependency reviews.
Okay.
So a child is in placement.
Okay.
They can be adjudicated dependent, and then a disposition happens. So where the child is best suited to be placed at that time. A hearing officer can make that decision if there's an agreement.
Okay. So let me ask you, if a child has to be removed from a home, they haven't reached the point of adoption, where are they at? And I'm talking about their permanency when it comes to having a safe, secure place. What are the options of temporary placement until a resolution can be found, a permanent resolution of their situation?
Well, the law, and again with our mission, we want to make sure the child's in the best placement, and hopefully that is a kinship placement.
Okay.
And kinship is defined as anyone who has a close relationship to that child or family.
Okay.
It could be someone the child doesn't even know, but the parents know. And it's also relatives.
Right.
Up until a 5th degree. So we look for those relatives, we want to find those relatives right away, and have that child with them. There are other placement options. We have regular foster care, so a stranger to the child and the family. We look to that as the next level, and always least restrictive. So what is the least traumatic? What is the most likely to harbor reunification and visitation with the family?
Okay.
The next level would be a group home, or a hospitalization, or an institution, which of course would be the least likely for us to choose for a child.
So these foster parents, how are they vetted? Because obviously they have a great responsibility. It's likely they'll only have a child under their guidance for a short period of time. How are they selected? Is it done at the county level, the state level? What are the requirements to be a foster parent?
Well, the foster care requirements are clearly defined in the law. They have to have their clearances through the Child Abuse Registry and the state police. And they have to have no record, basically, to be approved, and a loving home, of course.
Okay, sure.
We do license some foster homes, and we usually do an emergency on a kinship basis.
All right.
So if there was something going on in a family, we would want to reassure them. We can try to do this as quick as possible, because we are able to license a local foster home or a kinship relative if needed. However, we have been outsourcing them to other agencies.
Okay.
And they're also familiar with the laws, and they go in and inspect the home and make sure that everything is up to date and that they can pass all the requirements by the state to be a
So I
foster parent.
understand if we're contracting that out, we're obviously paying for that service. So are foster parents compensated?
Yes.
They are.
Yes, if you are a relative and you don't want to be compensated, you can choose that.
Okay.
Sometimes children have a social security payment,
Right.
so they can choose to have that instead. But we do pay for the outsourcing of the foster home and for that foster home to be paid to ensure that all the needs are met.
Okay. Are there any other elements of PA code, state regulations, or bulletins that notably and significantly influence what you and your staff does on a day-to-day basis?
Mostly the PA code.
Okay.
There is a lot of PA codes and bulletins issued by the Department of Human Services
Mhm.
that we have to follow. And the state regulates and goes through our license, and follows through with that to make sure that we're following those.
Okay, could you explain a little bit, I was looking at this document, mandated reporters, and I understand it comes out of ACT, which is more or less, for all intents and purposes, a law, Act 55. What is mandated reporting?
Well, mandated reporting is required by law. It's
Mhm.
anyone that has any contact with children on a daily basis. So you're really looking at your medical staff, your school staff,
Okay.
your coaches, your volunteers that work with kids. And the law requires, if you suspect abuse or neglect, or if a child does tell you that they were harmed in any way, that you have to report that. It is
Right.
your obligation. And there are penalties if you don't report. But the main thing is to know that you did the right thing by saying something.
Okay, all right, so certain occupational specialties are required if they have a sense, or there's an appearance, or they believe there might be some type of abuse that you previously described as what is child abuse, they're required to report it. So they report it to, do they report it to the police, to the state, direct to your office? How does that normally take place for mandated reporters?
Well, there is a website, it's
Okay.
Keep PA Kids Safe,
Okay?
and you can go in there and you can log in and have an actual account.
Mm-hmm,
And you can go in there and report that.
mm-hmm,
You can also call the hotline,
Mhm.
and that's Childline at 1-800-932-0313. Or you can call our office. There's someone at our office from 8:30 to 4:30 who can take that report
mm-hmm.
live.
What is the number at the office?
That's 570-325-3644.
Okay, so 570-325-3644, and that's direct to the Children and Youth Services at 76 Susquehanna, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Also, after hours, we do have someone emergency on call for emergency services, and that's usually where the police would call us if they have a situation. But anytime, any citizen can call the child abuse hotline and report something that they suspect.
Jill, would you be comfortable if there is a comment on Facebook? Are you comfortable answering that question if one would come up here?
I would do my best.
Yeah, again, and I understand there's certain sensitivities and certain laws that don't allow, but I'm talking a general question. So I'll just make that point. If there is a general question that you would like to have presented or considered to be presented to Jill Geisinger, the Director of Children and Youth Services, just put it in the chat. Again, this is live streaming on the Carbon County Commissioners Facebook page, and we're going to push it around elsewhere also. But again, if you have a question, just go ahead, you can type it in there, and I'll try to get to it during the short time that we have available with Jill. Jill, so let's talk on a little bit about custody. Can you give us an overview of custody, and when does it take place? When does custody change for a child who is abused or believed to have been abused?
Sure. So I just want to make it very clear that Children and Youth Services, caseworkers, supervisors, anyone does not have the ability to remove a child from a home.
Mhm.
The parents have their rights.
Mhm.
So the only people that can remove a child from a home are a judge
Mhm.
based on a petition filed by our office,
Right.
a police officer who feels a child is unsafe,
Mm-hmm.
and a medical doctor who feels a child should not be returned home, and usually that would be in a hospital setting. So if Children and Youth knocks on your door, there is no intent or purpose to remove a child from a home.
Mhm.
We're there to help, to try to see what is going on, assess the situation, and if it becomes a need, if there's an unsafe situation, or a
Mhm.
child's left home alone,
Right.
let's just say, we would file a petition, present the facts, and then a judge would make that decision.
Okay. The term associated with custody is safe haven. Can you explain that a little bit?
Safe haven.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful law.
Mm-hmm.
If a mother gives birth to a child, within 30 days of giving birth,
Mm-hmm.
they can present the child to a safe haven location, and usually that's a fire station or a hospital, medical facility, present that child there and leave without any repercussions of abandonment.
Wow. All right. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to hit upon a few questions that I have. And I didn't purposely kind of let me say, thread them into the conversation. So we might be stepping back a little bit. My assessment is right now you are probably close to the second or third largest office in Carbon County. Again, obviously the corrections officers at the prison are number one. You have 911 communicators, and adult probation is a fairly large one. But you're definitely right up there, I believe, in the top 3 or 4 when it comes to size. What is the selection process? Because I know there's a civil service aspect to your position. So how does that work when someone is interested in being a caseworker or working in your office?
So they can go to pa.gov and they can see if there's any positions available. We select off the civil service list.
Yep.
Almost all our positions come from civil service. And they would just have to meet the requirements of the job position and apply through there. We get them on the list and we bring them in to interview.
And how long of a process normally is that for an individual from application to hiring, on a regular basis without any unforeseen concerns or issues popping up for an individual?
It's usually about 4 weeks.
Okay.
Because we're required to have the state child abuse clearances and the state background checks and the fingerprinting from the FBI, that takes a while. So we have to have that right away, and the process goes pretty smoothly after that.
Is there a probationary period for new employees in the office?
There is. It's 6 months.
Okay.
We have been able to, through working with the commissioners,
Yeah.
which is very great, promote after 6 months
Okay.
with commendable status.
Okay. So what is the continuing education requirements? Because you mentioned the laws, and we know laws, amendments, changes are occurring, even in policies and procedures. So can you give a sense of changes that have taken place in regards to, how that's brought into the continuing education requirements of a person who works in your office?
Sure. You have to have a bachelor's degree to work with us. And at the beginning of a caseworker stay, they go through a program called Direct Service Worker Certification.
Okay.
And it's 120 hours. It's very intensive. And it's done through the University of Pittsburgh Child Welfare Resource Center.
Okay.
So the caseworker would go through that training, shadow out in the field with other experienced workers, and be certified in that. Also, every year you have to have 20 hours more of education, and mostly on these laws that we talked about.
Okay.
Continuing on with that.
So I'm assuming that the state is constantly pushing down training opportunities to keep everyone abreast of the changes.
Yes, and it's been very exciting with this growth in technology because of the COVID epidemic, that we're having more engagement and doing things online and trying to, promote getting out into the community in different ways through technology.
Right.
It's really exciting.
So how else, you mentioned the pandemic, and that was almost probably next on my list. So how did, because interesting enough, 2 months into the emergency declaration is when you came on board, and obviously you had been in the office, prior to the pandemic. But what was the impact? What were the changes you saw? And maybe what were some of the lessons learned? You talked about the potential now to further leveraging technology, but just kind of delve into the pandemic and its impact.
Sure. I think the community might be aware the most common reporting source is a mandated reporter who comes in contact with children very often. However, mandated reporters weren't seeing children as much during the pandemic, so our numbers did go down. We did see a quick rise over the summer when people were out and about, 11% increase from that reporting from the year before, which is kind of interesting. But we were able to kind of come up with new solutions on how to see kids and ensure their safety through that technology. So being able to use iPhones to do FaceTiming, something we never did before. Getting a Zoom account so that we can set up a quick Zoom and text somebody, hey, can you get on this Zoom and walk us, do a home visit through virtual means, which is something we haven't done. Getting in touch with all of our partners that we may not have been in touch with for a while, because we have that time to do that, and partnering with new services. So that's really been what we've been doing during that time.
So you talked about technology, and you specifically mentioned Zoom, which was just one of many platforms that could have been used. It just so happened to be the one that the county adopted and adapted for our use. My understanding is your office is participating in a pilot program with a Zoom phone. Can you explain that, what's going on, and how is that working out with the Zoom phone?
Sure.
Yeah.
All of my staff have a laptop that they take out in the field,
Okay.
and they have a headset, and they can they log into Zoom every morning,
Right.
and get their calls right through their Zoom account. It's going pretty well.
Mhm.
It's internet-based, so sometimes there's a little bit of because Carbon County has some spots where there's not very good internet, but they are able to talk to each other. We're able to communicate with each other inside the office, and we get our messages right on our computer, which is also very nice. We have to document everything that we do into a system that we have internet-based, and that allows us to kind of copy and paste our messages and kind of enhances that performance. But basically, the internet base is a nice function to have everywhere, and working remotely has also been something that we've had success with. They're able to get up in the morning and log in and do all their internet-based stuff at home, as well as when they're out on the road. And
So how often does a caseworker really have to be in the office? I suspect you have some mandatory training or meetings where you synchronize and coordinate, but is it a position that is, I guess, conducive to telecommute, teleworking in many aspects? Or at least part-time doing that, you know?
It is.
It is.
Our part-time caseworker staff, we were gonna try that completely remote telework.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had no applicants that were able to be hired, so we've tried that, and a lot of caseworkers like it, and a lot of caseworkers really like coming to the office and being a team.
Yeah.
But it has worked well, and using Zoom as our team meetings, visits, has worked well. And training also through remote meetings has worked really well. So it is a good job to have the telecommuting. And I think there's a lot of difference between just the personality of the person.
Sure, right. So one more point on the pandemic. How has it impacted the number of cases or reports that you were seeing compared to pre-pandemic?
So we had a decrease in the beginning because of schools being closed and activities being closed. However, we have seen a huge increase, at least 30% increase in the validation of reports. So the severity of reports has increased because of, I think, the lack of in-person services through mental health, the drug and alcohol, and that's what I'm seeing through based on our numbers. And also we are having an increase in outsourcing like services too, because that's been something we've been working on for a while. So we're able to partner with more services and help the kids that way. So our increase in numbers has been mostly from the services that were closed down during the pandemic.
Okay. Well, this is Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, and if you're just tuning in for the last few minutes here, I'm joined at this time by our Director of Children and Youth Services. I'm talking our, meaning Carbon County's Director of Children and Youth Services, Jill Geisinger, and she's going to be with us for a few minutes or more, and we're discussing children and youth services in Carbon County, and we were just talking about the increased validated incidents of child abuse since the pandemic. How do our numbers compare, again, proportionally speaking, to our neighboring counties?
It's pretty comparable, I think. We have similar numbers. There's a lot of larger counties surrounding us. I couldn't give you a percentage, but I think, again, the validation of reports has increased in our county, and also increased in the other counties. So indicated reports, and that's a report that's meets the definition of child abuse. Those have been increasing, and the amount of families that we open for services. So when a family comes in and we work with them for 60 days and we're not seeing seeming to be able to resolve the problems or find the right service for them,
Okay.
we provide them an ongoing service. And that's a caseworker going in the home every 30 days and trying to find the best service and to make sure all the needs are met. So that has increased quite a bit.
Okay.
We went, when I started back in April, we had 90 families, and now we have about 120 families.
Jill, I keep hearing that obviously the pandemic has created stresses on the organization just because the increased caseload. But yeah, I'd always heard that the Penn State Sandusky incident abuse problem also was an impetus or that created additional stress. Can you explain to those who are listening, what occurred with the Sandusky incident, or what came out of that incident that created a greater challenge on the individuals who work in your office?
That's a great question. In December of 2015, the Department of Human Services completely modified the Child Protective Services law.
Okay.
Increased it, made it more intense, and made sure that we, as children and youth workers, got more trainings on those things. So the standards of abuse lowered, and because they lowered, there was a lot more reports being made.
Okay.
Mandated reporter laws were very much raised and much more strict.
Right.
So there's a lot more reports being received.
Okay.
So in 2016, the office decided to hire a third supervisor
Okay.
for Children and Youth Services, and I became that supervisor
Right.
as the Child Protective Services unit. And then we actually had to move caseworkers into that unit. So everybody throughout the state saw an increase in numbers, an increase in reports, an increase in indicated statuses and validated statuses because of the strictness of the laws. And I think it was a very good thing that the Department of Human Services did that and lowered the standards so that we can make sure kids are safe and are getting the services they need.
So let's kind of wrap up here in the next 2 minutes or so. What's the biggest challenge your office faces or your caseworkers face?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the best way to help the community. I hear the same things when I go to a lot of meetings and we talk with community people is that they don't have the transportation to get to the services that they need.
Okay.
So we might have some waiting lists
Right.
For mental health and drug and alcohol, but getting to those places and same with our casework staff is trying to get everyone to get to the right services in the county.
Okay. Well, if you're just tuning in, I want to let you know that you will have an opportunity on the Carbon County Commissioners Facebook page and other groups that are Carbon County centric to watch the entirety of this conversation. That's Chris Lukasevich, Carbon County Commissioner, with the Director of Children and Youth Services, Jill Geisinger. And it's always an uncomfortable situation when I go to stop the live stream feed. But what I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to ask Jill, the Director of Children and Youth Services, first and foremost, to give us laymen who may not understand what we should be looking out for, indicators of potential abuse. I'm going to ask her to wrap up with giving us some indicators for abuse, and importantly, if one does see indications of abuse, those contact numbers or where on the internet and the web where we could go and report potential abuses so that they can be investigated. Jill, so if you can go ahead and wrap up with that, and I'll move around and get ready to stop the feed, okay?
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's really important. If you see something, say something, okay? If you see a child who is not acting themselves, if they're withdrawing, if they're self-harming, if they're just acting in any way differently, ask them, talk to them, make sure that you know that you're support. Go talk to someone else, talk to their parent, teacher, just have them go talk to someone. It's really, really important. And you can go to kidssafepa.gov, and you can go to our website, and you can go to the Department of Human Services website for more information. Call Childline at 1-800-932-0313. Please, thank you.
What about 570-325-3644?
That's our office.
That's the office. Okay, got it. Well, thank you so much.